Good morning again. I'll ask you to just continue to eat, but not socialize. Have a few remarks, and then Dr. Dethlefs will be giving a talk. So today we will be presenting the first annual Esperanza Award, and hope is the word. The Spanish word is Esperanza. And hope is kind of the precursor, I believe, to God's love. And we have had so many partners and leaders that have been instrumental in helping our diabetes hypertension program in the Dominican Republic thrive. And we felt it was important to recognize these key individuals because they have provided hope and love for our patients. That is excellent care through their collaboration. The first Esperanza Award will be given later this morning to Dr. Morel. I'm going to just give you a little summary of Chronic Care International. And I want to mention one thing. Susan Corpus, who's a board member of ours, was to be the MC, and I took her place, but she is doing an honorable, very honorable thing, and that is taking care of a dying friend. So she was not able to be with us today. So we can say a prayer for Susan and her friend. So chronic care, we need help. And I think hope is about getting help. We believe that our program is the most effective chronic care disease program in the developing world. That sounds pretty inflated, but we do. Chronic Care International is a nonprofit that for 11 years has administered a diabetes and high blood pressure treatment program for underserved people in the Dominican Republic. So these are people that can't afford and or don't have good access to health care. We have 1,200 patients in 2 rural communities and surrounding areas that now have blood pressure and blood sugar control rates that are equal to a comparable group in the United States. And we've done that comparison. We employ 2 doctors, 2 nurses, and 9 healthcare promoters that administer care. And we are working with a government district hospital and a large clinic in Santiago, Dominican Republic to utilize our same model of care. A third and equally exciting partnership is with Unbound in Kansas City, a nonprofit there that coordinates sponsorship for over 300,000 poor individuals in 18 underserved countries. We will be working with them to evaluate a chronic disease sponsorship model. In order to effectively manage these exciting opportunities and to transform chronic disease care for many more, we have this fundraising activity. We invite you to help us protect our patients who are in the midst of a perfect storm of diabetes, poverty, and there really is poverty there, and the pandemic. In order for our patients to avoid the exposure of taking public transportation to our clinic, we are delivering medications to their villages and homes. Our main need right now is to maintain our supply of medications, obtain mobile vans, monitor blood sugar results, and we're using A1C machines. And Maureen Nakamoto, would you stand up, please? She's right here. Give her applause, please, now. Maureen has worked silently for us for the whole time that we've been in existence. In the laboratory at the old hospital and in the laboratory now, and she has found 12 A1C machines that the hospital will donate for us, which we really need down there. A1C is a blood test that determines what the blood sugar has been for the last 3 months, and it's very important. It's part of modern health care for diabetics. And so Lorraine is just an angel, basically. We're also wanting to obtain mobile vans, and we want to extend care to more patients. So I'm glad to answer questions about the program, but we'll do that later. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Hans Dethlefs, the president of our board and medical director, and he will give a presentation entitled Hope. Sounds appropriate. Hans has a wonderful, quiet sense of humor and profound devotion to God and the Word. He is what makes CCI happen on a daily basis and at the board level as well. We are very fortunate to have servant leaders such as Hans. Dr. Dethlefs.
Good morning. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm putting a timer on, so you don't have to worry. I won't go but more than 10 minutes over. And I'm excited to be here. How's everyone doing? It's good breakfast. A couple months ago, as I was walking my dogs, or two little dogs, in the morning, our oldest daughter, Allison, called, and I said, "How are you doing?" She said, "Oh, I'm fine." And she asked me how I was doing, and I replied with the line, you probably all heard, that I already better I'd be twins. And Allison quickly fired back, "Let's hope you don't get any better." So, thank you, Father Hendrickson, who is a twin, for being here. At some point, you must have just been great, measure mark, and for the Hendricksons for co-hosting, and for our guests that came all the way from the Dominican Republic. I hope the breakfast was that good, but the trip was worth a while. This morning, I kind of wanted to walk through three movements with you. One is going to be a personal experiment that I'll share with you. Two is to hone in a little bit on your health, and all of you did some great work to help with that. And then three, tie that in to a little bit about who we are as Chronic Care International, what we do, why we do it. So I'll start off with my experiment. So as a doctor, I'm constantly consuming the most recent medical literature. I want to know what's new, what are changing about my practice. And so all the time I'm looking at article abstracts and new research. And there's two questions I ask myself. One, is this something I should incorporate into my practice, the advice that I give to my patients? And two, is this something that I should incorporate into my personal life? So in July, an article came out that caught my attention. Foods high in flavonoids may lower your risk for cognitive decline. So the article suggested that the outcome of their study was that if you have half a serving of a flavonoid-rich food on a daily basis, you reduce your risk of Alzheimer's, of dementia, and memory loss by 20%. And if you go on the high end, 4 or 5 portions a day, or 600 milligrams, you may reduce your risk up to 38%. That really struck me because in healthcare, we have nothing good to avoid dementia and memory loss and cognitive decline. So I decided that this is something that I would like to work with my patients on, and something that I would like to incorporate into my own life. And so to start my personal experiment, I needed to first figure out what is a flavonoid. Pat Mannion, as I walked by, she's like, "What's a flavonoid?" as she fills out her pre-workout. And I assured her by the end of the morning she would know. So a flavonoid comes from the Latin word flavus, which means yellow. And so flavonoids are naturally occurring pigments in our foods that give color to your food. It gives yellows and oranges, purples and blues. And my next question was, so where do you find flavonoids? And obviously colorful foods, but I found an article that was actually 160 pages long that detailed the flavonoid content of every food known to man. So I went through and I picked out the winners, the foods that have the most flavonoids in them. And so from there, my next step was to go shopping. So I went shopping for flavonoids. And I took a list, I circled those that I said, I'll eat that, and a stretch item or two that, I don't know if I would try that, but maybe. So After I went shopping, then it was a matter of incorporating it into my daily routine for that week for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What's my flavonoid going to be? And we culminated with our traditional Friday evening pizza night. And we still had our pizza, but the pizza was laden with flavonoid-rich foods. So peppers and purple onions, and it was colorful and delicious. So the second part of my experiment draws on a scripture passage that you're all familiar with, I'm sure, which is about the rich young man who came up to Jesus and said, "So what do I have to do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus says, "Well, you start naming some commandments: don't kill, don't steal, be a good person." The rich young man, yep, nodding, got it, done that, good. And he presses the issue further, says, "Is there anything else?" And Jesus says, "Well, go sell what you have, give to the poor, and come and follow me." And we're told that the rich young man walks away sad. And he walks away sad for two reasons. One, because he's attached to his things more than he's attached to people. And two, Jesus didn't say go sell and send to the poor, he said go give to the poor. And he was someone accustomed to working with, living with, and enjoying the time of people who are not poor, who are not dirty, and so he wasn't excited about going and interacting with the poor, which I think is the biggest part of the message, is that interacting with the poor is therapeutic, it is life-giving. And so the second part of my experiment was to put some flavonoids in a baggie, which was some cut up strawberries and some blueberries, and I invited Andrea, and we went on a field trip. This was this last Sunday, and we were looking for someone who was panhandling. So I don't know about you, but my typical approach to panhandlers is that I pull over to the lane furthest from where they're standing, I avert my gaze, and I try not to be too judgmental about it. If I give them $1, they're going to buy drugs and alcohol, and so that's my typical approach. So it was, for me, refreshing to actually want to find someone who was panhandling. And so we drove down the interstate, and I found myself disappointed. There's no one on that corner. There's no one on that corner. It was a Sunday. I thought, I'm going to take Sunday off. But sure enough, on 30th Street, right off the interstate, we found a gentleman. So I parked the car, looked both ways before I crossed the street across, and introduced myself. And the gentleman said, "My name," I said, "I'm Hans," and he said, "My name is T." And so I asked T, "Do you like blueberries and strawberries?" He says, "Well, I've got issues with blueberries. When I was a child, they made me pick blueberries, and I had to eat blueberries high all the time, and so I'm not crazy about blueberries." But I gave him the baggie anyway, and he proceeded to take out just the strawberries, which he kind of held up against his shirt. He dropped one of the strawberries on the ground and quickly picked it up, blew on it, and popped it in his mouth. I didn't have the heart to tell him that the 5-second rule does not apply to roadside surfaces. He went on to guzzle down the strawberries, and as he was eating, I said, "You know, T, you are a good and an important person." With that, T started to cry. And I wasn't sure if he was crying because he was that hungry and the strawberries were that good, or if he had never received that message before in his life. I asked T where he was from, and he said he's from Texas. And I asked, "So where are they born, Texas or Nebraska?" I said, "Well, in Texas, the hospitality is better." And I went, "Oh, that hurts." And the last time I was in Texas was a couple years ago. I was jogging along the road in a small town, and a burly highway patrolman pulled me over, essentially, and said, "Son, you're in a college town. Are you looking to get beat up?" And so when I think of Texan hospitality, that's what I have in my head. And T was ranking us in the heartland lower than that. So we need to step it up. The last part of my experiment was to take a bag full of strawberries and blueberries to the Stevens Center so more people could appreciate some flavonoid-rich foods that day. So why the experiment? Primarily because I want to be healthy, and so I need to change my life in some ways. I want to be happy, and I want my happiness to be outward facing, which is to say I want to be joyful. And I want all of that to align with my mountaintop, where I want to arrive in life eventually, which is to love God with all my mind, heart, soul, and strength, and to love my neighbor as myself. And to get to that mountaintop, I need to climb, I need to change. So all of you this morning went back to school and did some pre-work. You had to fill out my life routine. And so this is a list of some of the high leverage life habits that determine your trajectory in life towards health, happiness, joyfulness, or not. And so the way this plays out, and as a doctor on a daily basis, I receive patients who come with one purpose: they want to be well. And so I see people succeed, I see people fail, I see people thrive, I see people struggle, and I pay attention to all of that, and I look for inspiration, and I look for myself. So how does this play out? How do I help my patients change? How do I change myself? And it all starts off with, I know. So you all know now that flavonoids are good for you. And as a side note, I have a confession. You have all been poisoned with flavonoids this morning in your berries and your orange juice. And so you may walk out of here with unusual mental clarity, and I apologize for that. So I know, but what follows is but, oftentimes. So some of us make good choices some of the time. A few of us make perfect choices all the time. And that's because we say, I know, but, and there's two kinds of buts. There's internal buts and there's external buts. And the internal buts sound like, I don't like vegetables. I have issues with blueberries if you're T. I prefer my couch to my treadmill. I love popping donuts. I'm too busy. And the toughest is I feel fine and I don't want to change. The external buts sound more like this. I'm a student in debt, for those in the back. I understand. We have some business students and medical students with us today who probably can't afford flavonoids. Hang out on 30th and I'll catch you there. There's no good fruit in the winter for all of us living in the Midwest, like those who live in the Dominican Republic. We have nice fruit all the time. I'm homeless, and this is more on T's line. I'm homeless and have no money. I don't choose what they serve at the shelter, and I don't have good access to mental health services, so I can't see beyond today through the storm in my head related to drugs and mental illness. And so we have all these buts that we need to deal with. Most of us have our internal buts, and those living in poverty have a lot of external buts, which in healthcare nowadays we would call social determinants of health. And social determinants of health are those things that get between our patients and the ability to even think about living healthily. So another kind of deception this morning, besides lacing your food with flavonoids, was that you filled out on your pre-work something that I did not label as spiritual exercises, but that are actually 3 spiritual exercises. And I included these because they are common to all major world religions and actually find their places in the secular world as well. And when I see patients riding a roller coaster. And we all ride this roller coaster. We're doing great, we're exercising, we get a cold or we get COVID. We are doing great, and then something happens to a family member. There's lots of things that throw us off of the good routines that we work so hard to get. And so one thing that I've learned personally is that in order to make good choices continuously, consistently over time, we need some sort of internal self-corrective mechanism to keep us on track and to help us continue to climb. And the first of these is prayer. And so all of you have already done these 3 spiritual exercises this morning without knowing it. The first is prayer, and the part of prayer that I would hone in on is the taking time, the taking a sabbatical, the taking a break. And there's a lot of wisdom in the Judeo-Christian tradition of the Sabbath and the Ignatian tradition of the Examen, which is daily reflecting on what have been your habits for that day and your goals for that day. And so if we don't break open this space and time on a daily basis for 10 or 15 minutes, on a weekly basis on our Sabbath, then we go through life somewhat haphazardly without a vision to our horizon. And so the first essential piece, I think, to living healthily is to pray, to break open this time in our days, in our weeks, where we listen, where we have discourse with God, with our family, with those that inspire us. The second spiritual exercise is saying no to something that we desire or want on a regular basis, or fasting. In the Catholic world, that happens every Friday in Lent. You don't eat meat, and we think of people starving themselves, but fasting is broader than that. It's saying no to comfort because my wife needs help with the dishes. It's saying no to Krispy Kreme because I know flavonoids would be better for me. And so unless we have the habit of fasting, we get overrun by our desires, and we lack also in the Ignatian world what we would call detachment, or an interior freedom that lets us decide rather than having our desires decide for us. And then lastly is giving the best of yourself to someone else, which is almsgiving. We think of giving money to the poor, but it is also much broader than that. It is giving our best at work, even when we don't get paid more to give our best at work. It's smiling at least at the person who's panhandling rather than averting our gaze. It's giving the best of ourselves in small and large ways, always without being compensated. I would put one side note about fasting. We aren't meant to sit in front of the Krispy Kreme donut and say no to it. The failure of eating the Krispy Kreme donut isn't because we ate it, it's because we didn't fast from going through the drive-through, which is to say, we're not created to sit in front of temptation, we're created to fast from temptation as the first and foremost step. So, how does this tie into diabetes, high blood pressure, and living in poverty? So our patients in the Dominican Republic are all human. They have the same butts that you and I do. They don't like vegetables. And having diabetes doesn't all of a sudden make you a perfect person. You struggle with the same things. They don't like to exercise in 90-degree heat with 90% humidity with no air conditioning. And so having diabetes and high blood pressure doesn't change any of that, but it extends your list of butts internally extensively. People think in the Latino world, I've been told insulin is bad, and so we can't convince them to use it. I don't like poking my finger to check my sugar. I don't like pills. I'm afraid of low blood sugars. I never went to school. I have no money for health care. I live in a food desert. So the things that stand between you and I and good decisions in your pre-work this morning are the same for our patients, and they have this on top of that. And their external butts are more extensive, and ultimately they have double the butts and quadruple the consequences, because if they don't, in your pre-work, live far to the right on all those decisions, then they develop blindness, kidney failure, they lose their legs, they have chronic pain, and at a young age they have a heart attack or a stroke. And all of that creates a distress that we actually have something called diabetes distress, which is just being overwhelmed by how hard this is. And so, Chronic Care International, we want to take people from illness and despair to health and hope. But we know that between our patients and that, there are all these internal butts and all these external butts which are insurmountable and essentially make it impossible for our patients to get to the right side. It would be the same as expecting T to eat 5 portions of flavonoids every day. It's just not going to happen. It's not possible. So, as CCI, we have specialists on our board. We have Rachel Dowd here, who's a diabetes educator, and was nice enough to print out this list of the top 10 dietary aids that we put on your tables for you. We have Linda Philippi, one of our co-founders, also a diabetes educator, and Elizabeth Walker, a diabetes educator, and they are professionals at helping people kick their internal butts, if you will. And so we work with our staff in the Dominican Republic, our health promoters and nurses and doctors, to help our patients identify what changes they need to make to educate them and to do what we call self-management support to help them in their effort at kicking their internal butts. And the external barriers, or the external butts, are much more challenging, and they are beyond us as a small nonprofit, all-volunteer board. The social determinants of health are huge and difficult. And so that's where we rely on partnership. And so one of the biggest things for our patients is they can't afford health care, they don't have access to good systems of care, and they can't afford their medications, they don't know how to take their medications. So the money that you paid to come to breakfast this morning will help pay our staff who educate our patients, will help us buy medications, will help us buy A1C tests so that we can take down some of the external barriers and our patients can live with health and with hope. So I'd like to touch on just a few of those partnerships which are so important to us. First and foremost are our patients. Our relationship and our work is not one of give and take. It is one of invitation. And so our patients are the foremost important part to the solution to the problem. They are poor, they have lots of barriers between them and health, but they are talented, they are gifted. They are people who are made to fast and show extreme gratitude like T did when he received his strawberries. They are so thankful for what they receive. And so we've worked over time to organize all of our patients, the 1,200 patients, into 2 patient associations. One is called United in Faith, and one is called Zuvime, which stands for the Association of Salud United for a Better Life. And all of those 1,200 patients participate in a small group, what we call a group of 5, which is the patient and the 4 patients who live closest to them, because part of the external barriers of chronic disease are being socially isolated. And so our patients are organized so as to be peer groups for one another. And that helps remove one essential barrier, which is not being alone in this. During the course of the pandemic, we essentially transformed from being a clinic system receiving patients to being a mail-order pharmacy system. And so our patients and our teams have delivered medications to our patients in 30 villages for a year and a half. And this graph, what it shows is the percent of time that our patients have medications on hand. The best that we've ever done has been during the pandemic. And the patients from one of the associations said, we will work to raise money to pay for the gas and the transportation to get the medicines there. They knew that we as a nonprofit were struggling during the pandemic financially, and so they stepped it up. The amazing thing to me is that as we look at our control outcomes for diabetes and high blood pressure at this point in time, they haven't moved at all, which is to say we had great control going into the pandemic, and our patients are still extremely well controlled because of their own work. So a second partner which is essential to us is, Dr. Philip mentioned this and Father mentioned this, is ILAC and CESI. ILAC is a great organization that's been working in the Dominican Republic for over 40 years. CESI is the Dominican counterpart that Dr. Marcel works with. And without them, we couldn't do our work. They have trained 150 health promoters or more that work in hundreds of villages throughout the country. And we've been able to tap into their infrastructure to provide and develop our model of chronic disease care. And in the last year and a half, we've not gone to the Dominican Republic. We usually go 4 times a year. We've not been there for a year and a half, and the program walks on. And for me, that's very good news, which is that our patients aren't controlled because I go and give them a consultation. It's because Dominicans are serving Dominicans and doing it very well. Dr. Philip, I mentioned two other partnerships. We provide care to 1,200 patients. There's 500,000 people in the Dominican Republic, probably with diabetes, a billion with high blood pressure, or a million with high blood pressure. And so we need to figure out how to spread our model of care without necessarily being the providers of that care. And so Fontino is a public hospital that we started working with before the pandemic. And they will go live with their clinic for chronic disease care in October. And we're very excited about that. Dr. Morel has co-founded a primary care system in the poorest area of Santiago, one of the bigger cities in the Dominican Republic, and we've been working with them as well to implement a chronic disease program so that the thousands of workers in the local clothing industry can receive the best of care as well. A more recent and very exciting relationship that we've stepped into is with the Creighton Higher School of Business. 3 years ago, I met with Dr. Lance Frazier, who's in the back, in the Dominican Republic. We were just sitting down to some flavonoids and had an opportunity to chat. And that kind of, for us, planted the seed that there's good potential for a relationship between our patient associations who are working together to generate income to offset the cost of care and invite more patients into the program, and business minds, which are being developed at Creighton. And so the dream that was kind of born at that point in time is coming to fruition. So here with us are a number of students from the business school in the back, and there are 18 students taking a class geared towards social entrepreneurship. And the 18 students will go down to the Dominican Republic for their fall break here in October, and I'll be going down with them. And there are two pieces to the puzzle as far as their relationship. One is this, that the patients are willing to give of their time and talent to generate income, but they don't have business acumen, they don't have business experience, and so the 18 students, when they go down, will be splitting up into 4 small groups. The 4 groups will work with a group of our patients, and so the patients will divvy up as well and work with the students to come up with 4 good business ideas. And that can be a product, it can be a project, it can be anything along those lines. The students then will put together a pitch for those 4 ideas, the small groups, and will present those ideas with an executive summary to a CCI committee. And the committee will pick the best 2 of the 4 ideas, and then we have an anonymous donor, my father, who's agreed to give $10,000 so that each of those projects will have $5,000 of seed money, so that the students, once they've built out a full business plan for the winning ideas, can present that to the patients, and the patients can have funding to be able to walk and implement that on the ground. The second intriguing project that the business school is working on is what they call the Blue Box. And so this is a piece of technology developed by the Creighton Business School, which basically is a hard drive that you can put videos on, educational materials on, and it emits a Wi-Fi signal. And so the original concept was they could go to schools in rural areas that don't have internet access, essentially bring this portable internet, and the students could sign on to it with their iPad, with their telephone, with whatever technology they have available, and access their curriculum as though they were signing on to the internet. The potential for this really struck me as far as wanting to have a chronic disease program that grows other clinics. And so we have set up a little competition with our patient clinics. So we have 2 clinics, both in rural environments, each with their clinical team and patients. And so I've charged the 2 clinics, I've asked them to put together a 5-minute video that's entertaining and educational on how to identify and treat low blood sugar. So low blood sugar is a big risk if you have diabetes, a bigger risk if you live in a rural environment where there's no ambulances. And so it's essential that our patients, most of whom have not had education at the schooling level, it's essential that they understand clearly what is hypoglycemia, how to identify it, how do you treat it. And so the two clinics will be developing these 5-minute videos. We will put them on a blue box and display them, leave the blue box at the clinic, display them at the clinic while patients are there every day. And the patients will watch the two videos, and they'll vote on which video was best. And the winning clinic will also get a prize, undetermined as of now, probably flavonoids. The concept is that the patients will see in their own native language from their peers, from people they respect, what is hypoglycemia, and then our health promoters can debrief with them afterwards and say, what did you hear? What did you understand from that? And so we think it'll be a very powerful teaching tool, and we look forward to possibly then building really a library of portable internet content on education over time developed by our patients and staff. And the final relationship, which is essential to us, is you. Many of you have come to many breakfasts. Thank you so much for coming. For those of you here for the first time, please come back next year. Your financial support has really been what has kept us afloat as a nonprofit, especially during the pandemic. And so as a gift to you, you can't open them yet. On your table you have a homework envelope, which is the flavonoid challenge. I don't want you to open those now. It's homework, so take those home with you. The instructions and all the materials you require are included. If you decide, instead of doing the flavonoid challenge, to do the Krispy Kreme challenge, we will not police you, but there will be natural consequences. So the problem of tea, the problem of tea is not really social determinants of health. It's not that we don't have good shelters. It's not that we don't have good pantries. The problem of tea starts with me, essentially, that I'm the rich young man. I'm attached to all the good things that I have, and I'm inward facing, and I'm not standing with an outward facing posture. And that's what we need as the building blocks of a community that can do better than Texas, is all of us need to be an ideal building block of authentic community. We need to fast to have an interior freedom that allows us to give alms and have an outward-facing posture, and in the end, for all of us to live more healthy, happy, and joyful lives. CCI's vision is a world in which every community saves the lives of those with chronic disease. And the essential piece of this is it's not that CCI saves the lives of everyone with chronic disease, it's that communities are transformed, and that's going to happen, I think, primarily through our patients and our partnerships, so that you can be T and have mental illness issues, but find yourself cushioned within a community that supports you to such a degree that you don't need to stand on 30th off the interstate. My mother, who passed away a few years ago, had dementia in her last few years of life. And God bless our youngest daughter, Rachel, she invited my mother, nonetheless, to her mother-daughter breakfast at Marion when she was a freshman. And in the middle of the keynote speaker's presentation, my mother blurted out, "That's enough." You can imagine the terror in my younger daughter's mind. If my mother were here today, I'm convinced she would share the same sentiment. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you for your time.